Hello, you're listening to Tony Slattery's Rambling Club, and you're most welcome.
Hello, my name's Paul Carmichael.
And I'm Alan Lear.
And welcome once again to the presidential shed. You find us, as always, waiting for the president. He's still in there. He's been in there a while now, Alan. I don't know about you, but I could do with using the facilities at some point. I haven't gone since January.
It would be useful. I've been searching for the ensuite, but all I've found is endless media rooms so far.
Oh, there's a knock at the door. Do you want to get it?
Oh, okay. Quite insistent. Hello?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Please do not be alarmed. Just tell me, what year is this?
As far as I'm aware, it's the year of our Lord 2025.
Ah, your Lord 2025, perhaps. In my Lord, the year is 2344.
2344?
Indeed, or nearly quarter to midnight, depending on how you look at things. I come to bring dire prophecies of the future.
Good Lord.
I think we're already living them, but...
You are? Oh, well, I wouldn't worry about it then. I'm sure things will take care of themselves. Hello, my name is Mitch. What are you doing in this shed?
Good Lord. It's Mitch Benn. Mitch, how are you?
Handsome and talented, thank you. Holding it together. How about yourselves?
Less so.
Less of all of the above.
Yeah. But, well, welcome along to the shed. Look, if you've come to find the president, then, well, join the club, because we've been waiting for him for quite some months now. It's a bit of a queue for the loo, I'm afraid, if that was the plan.
No, it's fine. You know, well, you have a whole forest. Well, why are you waiting for the toilet?
Yes,
be like a bear.
True.
Make like a bear and do it in the woods.
Well,
You make a fine swell bear.
we thought of that, but Katie Manning had a nasty incident with a rose bush last week, so
Oh dear.
Yeah, she did.
we're fighting shy of that at present.
Fair enough. Well, she always was the scatterbrained one. You wouldn't have had that with Liz Shaw. Anyway. There's a reference. Yes. Apparently I am. Yes.
Yeah, as you're here, listen, what we do, president's not here, not looking, not listening. So what we normally do, we have a little go on the bingo machine and we go for a little ramble without him noticing. Do you fancy coming with us on one?
No, but I will, because that's the format.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, in that case, that's a good a reason as any for us to give the balls a spin and see where we end up.
Hang on. Okay. Oh, those balls. Oh, fine.
Tony's enchanted bingo machine. A curious contraption of cogs, levers, and glowing buttons that hums with ominous energy. This machine generates 3 completely random numbers. These numbers are fed directly into the Dewey Decimal System, the arcane reference system by which books and their contents are categorized. In this way, the bingo machine conjures from thin air a topic of conversation so enthralling, so wildly unexpected, that it leaves the members of the Rambling Club both bewildered and vaguely excited. Thus, another evening is saved from the brink of boredom, thanks to Tony's marvellous, possibly haunted and entirely inexplicable bingo machine.
Well, here we are in the great outdoors with Mitch Benn, our guest president, ready to begin our first ramble. And the numbers the machine has selected are...
2, 1, 6,
216, 216. And that means the subject is... a little bit confusing, because occasionally we get numbers that are no longer used, but here we've got no longer used, brackets, formerly evil. No longer used, but formerly evil. So 216, I think that's philosophy and religion and that sort of thing, but it's formerly evil.
When you say formerly evil, do you mean it used to be evil, or do you mean like Dracula, it's evil in an evening gown and opera cape?
Yes, formerly or formality. Yeah.
Formerly, this one I should have said.
Right.
Formerly
Okay.
evil. So it was formerly evil,
Well, if it's formerly evil, it's reformed.
presumably. So are we discussing reformed evil people? I can't think of many.
I've got a story about one though, which is quite amusing. It goes all the way back to my very earliest days in comedy. It was I think 1995 Edinburgh Fringe, and it was the first year that I had a proper comedy show on at the Edinburgh Fringe, and it was a two-hander between myself and my old pal Ian Kendall, and he's a magician. And I was sort of, we were sort of had overlapping bits, and then I would get up and do 10 minutes of stand-up and songs, and then we'd have another overlapping sort of sketch, and he'd come out and do 10, 15 minutes of magic and everything. He used to close the show with, I forget what the name of the trick is. It's the one where you swallow a bunch of razor blades and then a reel of cotton, and then you cough up a string of razor blades tied on a string of length of cotton. You've seen that trick, right? Okay, yeah. Anyway, we were flyering this on the Royal Mile, and this fairly distinctive-looking guy, who at the time must have been, I guess, kind of late 50s, steel grey hair, quite imposing looking, was walking up the street with his family, and Ian walked up to him and started flying it. Ian had just mastered this trick, which had sort of become his signature trick, which is where he took a big old silver dollar coin. Part of the trouble that magicians have had in this country is that all the coins that have been legal tender in this country since the 90s are useless for magic because they're too damn small. You can't see them. So he used to sort of go to antiques fairs and buy big old sort of 19th century copper pennies, which are about an inch across, or old silver dollars. And he used to have pockets full of these antique coins. And his signature trick came that he would hold out his two hands and drop the penny from one to the other. Just hold out his hands about 18 inches apart, and he'd drop the hand, and then he would start in the same position and then rotate his hands so that they were the other way up, and then the coin would just fly up out of that hand and pop straight up into this one. And it was an incredibly strong illusion. I do know how it's done, not saying, but he could stop, he could stop, people in the tracks of this, and then we'd fly him. So he does it to this guy who has a fairly thick Glaswegian accent. It transpires when he starts talking, and I forget what the guy said he was going to come to the show. Now, I don't think he ever did, but off we do. And then off he went, and I said to Ian, "You don't know who that was, do you?" And he said, "No." I said, "It took me a minute to place him. That was Jimmy Boyle." Now, Jimmy Boyle in the 70s was the scariest gangster in Glasgow, right? He was, leader proper Glasgow razor gangs, and there was a whole movie about him. David Heyman plays him. The Sense of Freedom it's called. And he was one of the most famously reformed prisoners because he was absolutely Tom Hardy as Charles Bronson level uncontrollable when he was in Barlini Nick, until finally they moved him into this wing where, they actually tried rehabilitation rather than just confinement. Got him into art, I seem to recall, and it turns out that he was, one of these guys who's basically, I think, misdiagnosed neurodivergent, actually kind of a bit of a genius. And he completely cleaned up his act, managed to get out on early release because he became, he became, one of the most cooperative and helpful prisoners in the whole joint. And ever since then, he's become this, I don't know if he's still around. I'll have to have a Google of him because he'll be cracking on now. But he became quite a famous campaigner for prison reform, as in I was a total mental bastard, but with the right kind of approach, I actually sorted myself out. So if it worked for me, it can work for anybody. But I just said, this is Jimmy Boyle, one of the scariest gangsters in Scottish history, and you were about to ask him to stick razor blades in your face. You were the first person ever to walk up to Jimmy Boyle, offer him a razor blade, and ask him to stick it in your face. So is he still? Yeah, he is still around. He is 80. Jimmy Boyle is now 80. He'll be 81 in, if this is going out middle of May, his birthday's the 17th. So it's probably sometime around Jimmy Bull's 81st birthday. But yeah, so there you go. That's a story about a reformed character. The time we met Jimmy Boyle. Yeah.
But you mentioned Charles Bronson, didn't he? And I mean, we mean Charles Bronson, who's famous in Britain.
The prisoner, rather than who named himself after Charles Bronson. Yeah.
Once took a prison guard hostage using only a biro just to prove he could, and then let the guy go again. Yeah, not Charles Bronson from Death Wish and all that. But the prisoner Charles Bronson, didn't he release an anti-bullying book?
Possibly, which is a bit rich, isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't bully anyone, or they'll come round and kill you.
Yeah, I should do a workout video on that
Yeah. Do either of you remember there was a thing about magicians when Paul Daniels did a show and they claimed that it was going out live. It wasn't, of course. And it ended with a stunt, which Paul Daniels said it was the most dangerous stunt ever.
It was an Iron Maiden. It was an Iron Maiden sketch.
That's right. And the thing snapped down on him, shut. And then they played it completely for real. The credits rolled just against black. And then and everyone, people, of course, were meant to assume, oh, that was hilarious, well done, Paul. But there were so many complaints that they had to announce it at the end of the 9 o'clock news that followed that, in fact, Paul wasn't dead. But everybody was convinced, which is just kind of remarkable that people would think that now, I suppose. But I remember
I'm just going to have a quick check as to when that was, because I remember. Because the thing is, how that would have been expected to go down would have been dependent upon when it actually happened. Because there are a couple of things I'm thinking about. One, obviously, is the here we go, 87. 87. That's interesting because that's nowhere. Well, that's nowhere near either of the two things I had in mind. There's one which would have made it sort of more forgivable, and one which would have made it less forgivable. If it had gone out any time after the release of Ghostwatch, then you can almost regard it as a kind of a TV magic spin on Ghostwatch. We will briefly pretend that something has happened, but essentially we're just doing a bit of cinema verite. But 87, that was 5 years before Ghostwatch. But it's also 3 years after Tommy Cooper expiring live on TV on Live at Her Majesty's. Which is what makes me think that, 3 years later, because I saw that. I was watching that when Tommy Cooper dropped dead. And, he got a laugh. Because everything Tommy Cooper did got a laugh. There's a play on in the West End at the moment called The Last Laugh. I went to see it a couple of weeks ago. Which is this sort of imaginary meeting in this dressing room between Cooper, Eric Morecambe, and Bob Monkhouse.
Bob Monkhouse,
And the guy playing Bob Monkhouse is a guy called Simon Cartwright, who is eerily accurate. It's a guy called Damien. I can't remember his name. Damien, so they're playing Tommy Cooper. He's a big, lumpy guy, and he's kind of got the mannerisms right. The guy playing Eric Morecambe is a guy called Bob. He's played him a bunch of times. Anyway, he's played him in other things. So his Eric impression is pretty good. But the guy Simon Cartwright, for a start, they've obviously put him into some fairly extreme makeup because that's what Bob Monkhouse looked like. Bob Monkhouse looked like he had been creosoted and his hair had been welded into place. And he also had those sort of slightly curiously robotic body language. And what's interesting, though, is that the play is kind of about that. The play is kind of about the fact that some people are just naturally funny and everything they do gets a laugh. And Cooper was the epitome of that. I remember one of the things they said about Cooper was he was so bloody funny. You were laughing when you bought the tickets. You know what I mean? In anticipation of how funny he was going to be. And Morecambe, again, was just a naturally very funny guy. Monkhouse was not a naturally funny guy. He was just obsessed with comedy. And his approach was completely technically based. He understood the mechanics of it. He understood sort of the rhythms of comedy, the structures of comedy. Even though he himself was not a naturally amusing presence.
Younger listeners may be thinking of Jimmy Carr at this stage.
Very, very similar. Very similar. Jimmy is not a naturally humorous presence, and he does have a lot of the same weird sort of animatronic body language that Bob Monkhouse used to have, But again, it's the same thing. He's very much a student of the form. He understands it on a technical level, even if he isn't necessarily the kind of guy who just makes you laugh just by turning up. The way that Cooper and Eric Morecambe were. But Henry so I was watching Tommy Cooper when he keeled over and died. Like, I don't feel at all well, he said, and then he just over he went. And it was only when, because Life of Her Majesty's, being as it was, a kind of an attempt to revive Sunday Night at the London Palladium, they didn't have the rotating stage that they used to do from the end of Sunday Night at the Palladium, but they did do what Sunday Night at the Palladium did, which is bring everybody on stage for a curtain call for the closing credits. And there was no Cooper. There was conspicuously no Cooper. And I think that was the first point. It was oh shit. And then immediately the show ended. We interrupt this program. Tommy Cooper was pronounced dead on arrival at whichever hospital they took him to. Oh my God, we actually saw him go. And of course, something very similar happened to a friend of mine just over, was it 6 years ago? Incognito, who was the last of the genuinely loose cannons on the comedy circuit. And somebody I'd known for quite a while. He was one of the first sort of really professional comedians I ever worked with, sort of back in the 90s when I was still living up in Edinburgh, just trying to get a toehold in the business. He came up and did a show in Edinburgh, and I was supporting him, and we sort of went out the piss afterwards, which is always a bit of a calculated risk where Cogs is concerned. And he was just, legendarily loose cannon, but thoroughly nice guy. When it came down to it. I've got a great story about. They did a documentary about Cogs after he died, in which they used a song I'd written about him just after he went, called "The Hammer and the Nail," which is partly a description of sort of being your own worst enemy, as he absolutely definitely was, but also a reference to an opening gambit he developed in the 90s, where he would wander on stage in a long coat, and from the pockets of this coat he would produce a big hammer and an 8-inch nail. He would then hammer that nail into whatever wooden surface was available, including on a couple of occasions a piano, and would then take his coat off and hang it on the nail. And then we'd turn to the audience and say, "That's two things you need to know about me. I don't give a fuck, and I've got a hammer." And that was his opening gambit. And he was fucking nuts. The tragedy of it is, I met him about a month before he died, and he was on the wagon. He was off everything. He was in recovery. He was off all the drugs. He was off all the booze and everything. And then about a month later, his heart came out on stage at the age of 60. So I guess the damage had just been done, Yeah. At the end of the day, it's like, you don't get to cane it for decades and then, expect not to have, already essentially sealed your fate, even if you clean it behind. But it was a terrible, terrible shame. It was fun. But my favourite Cogs story was, because he used to play guitar a bit, although occasionally he would have his guitar and not use it. But that was classic Cogs. He used to have one of those things that, those things called a silent guitar. It's just like the neck and just like the neck with a kind of a metal frame around it. So it's just like the frame of a guitar. He did a couple of shows once where he was prowling around on stage and he had this thing across his back the whole time and hadn't played a note on it at all. And then in the end, he starts and says, like, we do things with no good reason. Like, we do things we don't want to do. We spend money on stuff we don't need. And then he holds the guitar and says, I don't even know what the fuck this is. And then puts it back in his back and never refers to it again. But the only times I would ever really get to see him would be at Glastonbury, because we'd all be there for the whole weekend around the back of the comedy tent, which had its own sort of comedians only campsite, which was quite the place some years. I do remember my favourite line of his when he was at Glastonbury. He says, "You never get to see everything you want to see at Glastonbury. There's too much going on. There's too much happening. Anything you want to go and see, it's going to clash with something else, isn't it? Like, for example, yesterday, I really wanted to go and see Fun-Loving Criminals, but it clashed with me lying face down in a ditch full of my own piss."
The silent guitar reminds me. I don't know if you remember this, but in fact, either of you might remember this. In the 80s, maybe early 90s, there used to be a busker in Liverpool. He had a cardboard guitar. and he would stand
Plinky Plonk, he was called, wasn't it?
Plinky Plonky Plonk, because he strummed the guitar.
Yeah,
Half Man Half Biscuit used him in a music video, and he must have got an influx of cash from somewhere because he upgraded from a cardboard guitar to a badminton racket. And he used to stand there pretending to play a badminton racket.
It's wonderful.
And because it was Liverpool, people gave him money because it's funny.
Exactly, yeah. Well, last time I was in Liverpool, Darth Vader was busking on Williamson Square. There's got a complete Darth Vader suit with a little sort of keyboard and a little amp, just vamping away on his keyboard in a complete Darth Vader costume. But, yeah. But anyway, my favourite Cog story, this would have been probably about 2003, 2004, certainly before my kids were born. And when I was still with my ex-wife, Clara, obviously, because, the kids hadn't come along yet. And in this comedian's campsite, every year at Glastonbury, you tended to have, on the last night of the festival, the Sunday night, you tended to have the party that would not die, right? The party would start some in the comedian's campsite, either sort of in and around somebody's caravan or just around a campfire or something. And it would just keep going. It would just soldier on and refuse to stop, because while we're still at this party, the festival's not over, god damn it. Even as literally it's being dismantled around us, everything's being taken down and folded up and taken away, and there's still this little knot of baked comedians just refusing to go home. No! Anyway, one year, this was happening in front of Cogs's caravan, and eventually it boiled down to me, Cogs, and Clara, my wife at the time. And Clara eventually said at about 9 a.m., it's not even late, it's the next day, you know what I mean? Yeah. We can smell bacon, but we're still sitting there with our guitars out. We've been singing bloody songs all fucking night. And Clara eventually goes, look, one of us is going to have to be in some kind of state to drive at about 2 o'clock this afternoon. I'm off to bed. And I went, yeah, okay, babe. And off she went. And off she goes. And that's when Cogs remembers he's got some coke. Right? They go, oh, hang on, goes Cogs, hang on, just a minute, disappears at the cabin, comes back with a little tin, opens it up and starts chopping it out. And I'm like, it's literally 9:30 in the morning. I'm looking at this. Now, the thing about Cogs was, you always kind of knew he had very, very pale blue eyes, very unusual for an Italian guy. His real name is Barbieri. But he had kind of Oliver Reed eyelids, if you know what I mean. And you know the way the legends of Oliver Reed are, is that he was, Mr. Life and Soul, until suddenly at about 3 a.m. those eyes would hood over. And you think, oh, fuck, here we go. You know what I mean? It's the other Ollie has arrived. You know what I mean? And Cogs had a bit of that going on with the eyes. You know what I mean? There would come a moment when the eyes would hood over. We think, oh, shit, we're in trouble now. Right? So he starts chopping out these lights. And he goes, would you care for something? And I'm going, oh, Christ. Cogs, well, look, I'm going to have to go get some sleep at some point. So it's probably not a good idea. And he just looks at me. And the eyelids come down, and I think, oh, here we go. And then he splits into the biggest grin I've ever seen him do. And he goes, it's never a good idea. It's never a good idea. That's the best sort of self-destructive mantra I've ever heard in my life. It's never a good idea. But yeah, so having seen that happen to Cooper on the TV, then I wasn't there, obviously. I heard about it the next morning. But that was a terrible shame. But some of us are never going to live to a ripe old, and you kind of know, there's certain people that you meet, they say, you're never going to see your state pension, just hope you have enough fun in the meantime, I suppose.
Yeah, yes, I think with that video, famously, of course, it was kept, LWT kept it. It's like, no, nobody's ever going to touch that again. But then the ITV archive got centralised in Leeds, and a Swedish company contacted ITV saying, oh, we would like the rights to this episode. Whoever was in charge of licensing didn't know and said,
didn't know it was that one. Yeah. Because it's all over YouTube now. If you really want to watch Tommy Cooper drop dead, you can. You know, I mean, I happened to be watching when it went out live, and there was nothing anybody could do. But you're right; they tried to sit there for a long time. But if you feel your life is not complete without watching Tommy Cooper drop dead, then it is out there if you want it. You know.
Yeah.
But that's by no means the grippest. You know.
We've had Les Dennis on here, not Les.
Yeah.
Les Dennis a little while ago, and of course it was he and Dustin G followed Tommy Cooper.
Blimey, so they did.
So they were doing their act with Tommy Cooper lying dead behind the curtain.
Like dead in the wings, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, because curtains came down, they shoved a commercial break in, and then it's like, well, we've got to go back. So they're on the front, and Les said you could hear them trying to revive him just behind the curtain while they're trying to do their act.
Because when they cut to commercial, his boots are still sticking out the tabs. You know what I mean? I mean, that was a classic Cooper. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, his boots sticking out the curtains. It's just, you know, that's the thing. Is it got a lot? People thought it was. Well, apparently, when Cogs went, people thought it was a callback because he'd done a line earlier on about, would it be terrible if I was to have a massive stroke right now and started talking Welsh? And then so apparently, when he then literally collapsed about 10 minutes later, people thought I was going to sit up and start talking Welsh, isn't he? But no, he never did. But yeah.
It's a bit
exactly.
in the Rocket Heart, that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Have you ever seen the edition of Sunday Night at the London Palladium when there was a strike? The Variety Artists Union went on strike, and suddenly Delfont's there going, well, we can't do the show at all. And they did. Yeah. And the whole thing is just Bruce Forsyth and Norman Wisdom, and they put it together on the day. And it's a stunning hour of television.
I have heard about that.
By the end of it, they're lying on the Revolve, both just absolutely knackered, sweating and exhausted. It's remarkable.
Well, I mean, well, my manager, Ian Wilson, was Bruce's manager until he died. So I've heard a lot of the legends of Bruce, so I have heard about that. I went to see Bruce live a couple of times. Last time I saw him was last time he played the Albert Hall. And it was good because the one thing which apparently they didn't really want getting out while he was doing Strictly was the fact that he found Strictly kind of weirdly unrewarding because on the one hand, he loved being Mr. Saturday Night again because how could you not? But Bruce was all about the punters. And that's why he loved the Generation Game because the punters were up on stage with him. But Bruce is all crowd work. All crowd work. It's funny. He'd be a TikTok star right now because all the clips of the comedians that are going ballistic on TikTok and on Instagram Reels, it's all crowd work. It's all people getting into sort of, you know, weird bits of banter with the audience. And Bruce is one of the best at that. When I went to see him at the Albert Hall, he hardly ever he only went up on stage, I think, to play the piano. You know what I mean? The rest of the time, he was literally wandering the aisles, striking up conversations with people. That was what he was all about. But the reason he found Strictly so weird is, of course, that he's on the stage, he's got the band immediately behind him, and then he's got like 50 yards of dance floor in front of him, and the audience are barely at the edge of his field of vision. You know, so it's a bit like, you know, I read Steve Martin's autobiography that he packed up doing live stand-up when it became financially unviable to play anything other than stadiums. And it's just like, this is I hope that they're enjoying themselves because I'm not, you know. I'm standing on this, you know, this football pitch-sized stage. I'm dimly aware that somewhere out in that blackness in front of me is an audience, but I can't hear them. I can't see them. I'm leaving gaps where I think the laughs are going to go, but the PA's so loud, you know, in my own fallback is so loud. I can't actually hear I can't see him, and it's just, you know, it's like I'm, you know, performing in a sensory deprivation tank, you know, and it's and that's why Steve Martin jacked in doing live stand up because, you know, it just didn't make financial sense to play even theaters anymore. You know, they're sending him out to play like, you know, arenas and baseball grounds and that. It's like, you know, yeah, I mean, that must be very weird. Biggest place I've ever played, I think, is the Old Comedy Tent at Glastonbury. You can get about 1,000 people into that when it's full. And that's probably the biggest audiences I've ever played. So, live audience anyway, yeah.
It's rather like if you watch Monty Python live at the Hollywood Bowl, it's so cold, isn't it? It's just too big, and you can't get the atmosphere that you would have got of them stuck in Studio 7 in 1969. There's a coldness then, I think, because it's too big.
Comedy spaces can, it can really help. Certainly doing live comedy, the shape of the room can make a hell of a difference. I remember I did a gig just recently. I won't say where it is because the gig is actually quite nice and the people running it are really good. But it's in a church, and the stage is just at one end of the church, and the space is so vast that they cram all the audience right up to the stage, but somehow you can tell there's just too much air around them. Do you know what I mean?
I think we did that with Tony one time.
Yeah, quite apart from the fact that you've got kind of Led Zeppelin 4 levels of reverb on everything you do. Which is great when you're playing the drum intro to When the Levee Breaks, but when you're trying to do a comedy song with quite rapid lyrics, a lot of them are just getting lost in the kind of the aural soup, but also it's just the energy kind of dissipates. There's you contrast that with playing like the Glasgow Stand, in Glasgow. That's such a confined space, and the front row were literally sort of at your knees. There's only about a 12-inch elevation on the stage, and the front row are right there, and everybody's cramming it together. That whatever kind of, and this kind of sounds like wank, but it is the way it works. Whatever kind of energy you generate in that room has nowhere to go. So it just kind of builds up like this comedy pressure cooker, until eventually just everything you're doing is getting absolute howls because, the momentum you build up never dissipates, whereas when you're playing in a big empty space like that. So, yeah, I've done, I'm trying to think if I've done because generally speaking, even at rock festivals, they tend to put the comedy on in a tent rather than out in the field. I have done open air gigs and they can be quite difficult. I've done a few open air gigs, but never particularly vast open air gigs. It's worth pointing out that when they talk about playing Glastonbury, you're not on the pyramid stage. You're on the stage in a big, it's in a big marquee, it's in like a big top. So it's still a big space. You still get about 1,000 people in there, but it is at least enclosed in some way. But yeah, I can imagine. Because they used to do that. Do they still do that? There's just always rumors, stories in the the 70s of prog bands sending comedians out first, and I can't think of anything worse. Actually, no, I tell you something which is worse, and this was another open air gig, was the time I had to follow Electric Six.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was, I'm trying to remember what it was. This is about 2004, I think, so Gay Bar is in the charts. Right? This is when they were the absolute height of their powers. High Voltage had been a big hit, and then Gay Bar was massive. And I think it was when Gay Bar were in the charts, and I was playing, I think it was Plymouth University's graduation ball, and they were doing the whole thing on the roof. Everything was happening on the roof. I'm trying to remember if we were in a marquee on the roof or just literally on the roof. I suspect we may have just been on the roof of the Plymouth University Student Union building. And when I got there, I saw the running order, and it was Electric Six, 9 until 11, 11:15, Mitch Benn. And I look at them going, "You're fucking joking!" And what it was is it was apparently I was meant to be opening for Electric Six, as might have made a modicum of sense, but would probably still have been fairly unrewarding. But they'd had some ordinance through from the council that all the loud rock and roll had to be over by 11. So suddenly Electric Six were opening for me. And I'm like, oh, fuck, But, whatever. I got to watch Electric Six, from behind, but I got to watch it. And then, it was all a bit of a bloody waste of time, to be honest. But actually the best one of those was in no way my fault. Was it about 2012? I was asked to do, I think it was the launch party for whatever Microsoft's iPad knockoff was called. Was it the Slate or something? Microsoft came up with an iPad knockoff anyway, about a year after the iPad came out. So it was about 2012. And they're having this big launch party. And it was in the afternoon at the Microsoft headquarters, which is our call is in Reading. And I had to close it because the act they really wanted was a bandaman. Rob Broderick does improvised rap, and he apparently had done their Christmas party about 6 months earlier and had absolutely blown the roof off the joint. So everybody's like, get him back for the launch party. So he came back, but he had to go on first because this was all happening at about 2 p.m. in Reading, and he had to be in Manchester by about 7 or something. So Rob had to go on first. And I said, all right, fine, I'll close it. And there was a guy in the middle whose name I do not recall, who was a magician, right? He was going to get up and do magic. Now, Microsoft's headquarters in Reading was like one of those buildings with like a massive open central core and then like circular floors all the way around it, if you see what I mean. So you come into this huge atrium, which goes all the way up to the ceiling of the building, and then you've got loads and loads and loads of balconies, if you like, where all the individual office floors are. But like this central sort of, atrium of the building is open, goes all the way up to the top. So when I get there, a band of men are about to go on, and the floor is full, and there's people on all the balconies, right? So there's a good few hundred people in to see a band of men, and I'm sitting like behind this curtain. In like this little makeshift green room, there may be on a curtain. I'm sitting there with like the crisps and the bottles of pop or whatever, and I'm listening to Rob go on, and Rob goes on, and he has an absolute blinder. And I say, yes, no wonder they wanted it back. He has a great time, and he does like 20 minutes, and whichever guy from the company is company, ladies and gentlemen, a man, woo, screams, right? And now please welcome, and I do not remember the name of the magician, but out he goes, and I'm sitting behind this curtain, and I'm thinking, he sounds like he's struggling a bit. Yeah, it's probably, this is why a Bannerman should really have gone on last, because he's having to follow him. At least I've got this guy first, and then I'm going on after him. But he doesn't sound like he's having that much fun. And he's out there for about 15, 20 minutes. And he comes back through the curtain looking absolutely ashen. And I think, no, he really didn't enjoy himself, did he? And then the compare, the guy from the company goes, and please welcome you, find out in the afternoon. And so, Mitch Benn. And I come out through the curtain, and there's about 12 people left. The place is empty. It's like, there's nobody on the balconies, and there's literally about 12 people still standing in front of the little stage. I think, oh my God, they all fucked off. And so I ended up having quite a good time with the 12 people that were there. And they were paying me a hell of a lot of money, so I'm not going to complain. I was getting a lot of money for that, but I did, oh my God, poor sod. He literally started that set with about 800 people, and he managed to get rid of about all of them. But this is what happens when people don't pay for the show. This is what happens when people don't pay to get in. It's obviously this is just thrown on for these guys in the middle of their workday. They didn't pay to get in. They weren't in any way invested in it being in any good. So they saw the guy they wanted to see, and then they pissed off back to whatever it is they do in Microsoft for a living. And having then left, they weren't going to come back 20 minutes later for me. So that was at least I get to. Cling to the fact that I can't really be held responsible for that one. But yeah.
I have seen a comedian. Sorry, I have seen a comedian support a band. I saw Neil Hamburger, I think it was, support Tenacious D in Brixton Academy.
Yeah, but that's kind of a comedy band, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's more like me taking a non-singing comedian on to support me. Which in all honesty I probably would do if I could afford support acts, which I can't.
Well, it didn't work for Neil Hamburger. He had a shocking time.
Did he? And, that's a shame.
And he really turned the audience against him about midway through with the Princess Diana gag. But I'm pretty sure.
Really? When was this?
When
was this?
Oh, 2000 and I don't know, 2005, 2007.
That's a while after.
About 8 years ago.
Been dead for a bit. Yeah.
Well, I remember that my opening line at the first gig I did after 9/11 was I just came out on stage and went, well, I guess it's okay to crack Diana jokes then. And that was the only reference I made to it, well, I guess it's okay to crack Diana jokes then. Yeah. Oh. But
your trauma has been topped.
Exactly, yeah. I see your dead princess. And I raise
you. Well, here we go. The numbers for our second ramble are
7, 7, 6.
776, 776, and that means that the subject is Computer art.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. How do we feel about that? Yeah.
Well, the trouble is it's getting too good. Because you could tell for a long time, but somebody taught ChatGPT what hands are, and now we're all because for a while I have a whole bit in the show I've just finished about AI, and about the fact that it's funny actually because it's a classic example of you never know when a joke's going to be topical, because I'm talking about how artificial actually has kind of two meanings. It is pure essential. It literally means it's man-made. That's all artificial means. The distinction between art and nature. And art just literally means artifact, artificia, artificial, right? Just literally means made. It means man-made. It means human-made. And over the years, of course, it's developed that secondary meaning, slightly pejorative sense of fake, imitation, inferior, knockoff. And I would suggest that what we've had thus far as regards artificial intelligence is that secondary sense of artificial. It's not real. It's fake intelligence. It's imitation intelligence. It's algorithmic learning, which can be trained to mimic intelligence in the way it interacts with the user, but there is as yet no actual consciousness underpinning what it's doing. And I say that's why it can't make anything original. That's why people say, oh, it can write stories. It can do that. No, it doesn't. All it does, you ask it to do a thing, and it scours the whole internet for anything which sounds or looks anything like what you've asked it to do, mashes them all together, and then produces this kind of flaccid hybrid version, which shows no understanding of the value of anything that went into it. It's Noel Gallagher in a box. And of course, it can never learn from its... It can never learn from its mistakes because it doesn't recognize them as mistakes or process them as mistakes. It just makes the same mistakes over and compounds them every time. It's Liam Gallagher in a box. And I wrote those jokes with my wife, Kathy, at about this time last year for that year's Edinburgh show. And who knew by the time I actually came to the festival, they were going to be the only topical gags in the show. Because... it was, while we were up in Edinburgh, it was announced, A, they're back together, and B, they're playing Edinburgh in the middle of the next Fringe, and as such, we'll probably fuck it up for everybody else. So, we thought we'd just thrown a little, nostalgia bone out to our fellow Gen Xers, but turns out that was the only time we've ever anticipated the news. But I don't know, as regards AI, I think as people are starting to understand its capabilities, they're also understanding its limitations. Because there have been a few very public examples of its limitations being exposed. Do you remember that terrible Willy Wonka theme park?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
We were at a Comic Con with Tony. And it wasn't, I'll be honest, it wasn't a stellar lineup. I think the headliner was Mark the Beast Labatt from Off the Chase.
Fair enough.
The 11 o'clock photo call was for no one at all. And one of the guests was the glam Oompa Loompa from out of the Willy Wonka.
Ha! Okay, well, whatever works, I guess. But
she was lovely. She just went around handing sweets to people. She was great.
Excellent. Well, one can have too many umbrellas. But the point I was going to make is that when that was sort of became very much exposed throughout the news as the obvious fucking scam that it was. One of the things that all the the scare actors who meant to be part of it said is we were just handed a wad of A4 paper when we got there with this vague script on it, which had apparently been written by ChatGPT. So not only could they not be asked to do it, they just basically said to ChatGPT, write a script for a bunch of scare actors and a Willy Wonka thing. Blah, out it came. But what people said is that there's one element in it which had nothing to do with Roald Dahl, which is this mysterious bad guy called the Unknown who lives in the walls.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then somebody pointed out that same entity is now turning up in most shit Kindle fantasy novels. And this is one of the limitations that the AI has, is that it doesn't get the idea of people want distinctiveness in the stuff that it produces. If everybody in the country says to ChatGPT, write me a 60,000 word fantasy novel, click, it's going to write the same one for everybody. According to the prompts prompts, if you're not incredibly specific in the prompts, it will just basically do the same shit it's doing for everybody. So what you hear about these scams that people are essentially setting AI engines to publish about 100 novels a day.
Yeah.
Because you could automate the whole thing on KDP. You can literally automate it, say, write a 60,000 word fantasy novel, generate this cover image, submit it to KDP, and it's up there by the end of the day. But what that is doing, of course, is it's making the whole, self-published thing, the whole Kindle novel thing, even more of a swamp than it was already. Because the great thing about self-publishing is anybody can publish a book. The worst thing about self-publishing is anybody can publish a book, including people who probably really shouldn't. But now, say you've got these con artists essentially setting up AI engines to crank these things out. So there are now thousands of novels on Kindle and the other e-readers that aren't actually real novels. They're sort of fake stories written by machines with fake covers generated by machines, and until you actually try and read the damn thing, it's probably impossible to tell the difference. I don't know.
When Tony passed away, there were two unofficial biographies were available within days of him passing away. One of them was 15 quid and it was 66 pages long.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it is. It's provided, and again, it's the same trouble that you've got with everything online, is that it's so hard to police because the internet is too vast and too fast for people to keep track of it. It's an almost unpoliceable environment. It's like, every now and again, whoever's Home Secretary will say, we are going to crack down on internet porn. And I just think, oh yeah, off you go.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Let us know how you get on. Go on then.
You couldn't even keep on top of novel drugs. They actually have to be synthesized.
And they actually exist in the real world. Yeah, exactly. Quite, So it's just off you go then. Best of luck with that. And it's just politicians do have a bad habit of confusing authority with ability. Yes, you have the authority to do this. Doesn't mean you can.
No.
Exactly. And so, you have the authority to police the internet. You have the authority to crack down an internet porn. You have the authority to, regulate the AI fiction industry. But it's almost impossible technically and physically to do this. I don't know. One thing, if anything, as ever, the thing which is going to bring an end to it is when people get sick to death of it. But the trouble is, in dying, it may take some worthwhile stuff along with it.
Yeah. Is there a minor,
you see what I mean?
Is there a minor irony in the fact that Roald Dahl actually predicted this in his story, The Great Automatic Grammatizator?
Well, George Orwell predicted it in '84. That's what Julia does. Is she works in the automated porn section, if you remember. She works on the automatic porn machines.
While also being a member of the Junior Anti-Sex League.
Anti-Sex League, exactly. And horny as fuck. She's a woman of many layers, Julia, in 1984. But anyway,
I had a very strange experience with ChatGPT. I presume it was a ChatGPT thing. About 3 weeks ago, I was sat here recording this little voiceover thing, and my phone rang, and that annoyed me because obviously I should have turned it off. So I've got this recorded, and it's fascinating. It was someone called Susan, and Susan was calling me to see if I wanted any solar panels fitting. But then I thought, your voice doesn't sound quite right. So I said, Susan, are you an AI program? And she said, no, I'm not an AI program. I'm a human representative of the company. So I'm just wondering if you would like this. And I wasn't happy. So I said, are you an AI program? And there was an exasperation to the voice saying, no, I am a human representative. Blah, 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 blah. And then I went for a third time. Are you an AI program? Yes. And it admitted it, but it lied to me twice. I've got that recorded. I might put it on the end of this, actually, because that was a bit scary. The fact that it lied twice and then admitted. That was really quite freaky.
Yeah, in your face, Isaac Asimov. But it's true. But, these things are as precisely as ethical as the people operating and setting them up will choose to make them. And that's the trouble. You know what I mean? Because as we know, what's really worrying is not so much, the short-term larceny, it's the unintended consequences. Because these, the people setting this up are after a quick buck, literally, fake biography of Tony 2 days later, 15 quid. If we just sell 3 of those, then he's made his money back, and if he never sells any of them, then it's just up there and he hasn't actually, wasted any time doing anything. But but what is worrying is the unintended consequences. And as yet we don't know what those are, because that's how unintended consequences work. I don't necessarily think, I'm not necessarily thinking, of like Skynet, but I'm thinking of there's certain fields of human endeavor which might suffer as a result of this. And we're already seeing it then again, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. I would not employ, the stuff I'm doing at the moment, for example, my Bandcamp site, Kathy and I have completely overhauled my Bandcamp site in the last 12 months, because she pointed out to me that I've had this Bandcamp is. It's download, it's music download. I say, think of it as Spotify for people who don't mind getting paid. But I've had this Bandcamp site for about 12 years, and she pointed out that the only time it ever did any business was at Christmas, because I used to put a couple of things up every Christmas. I put this complete unabridged audio book of Christmas Carol, and I put my Christmas album up there, which gets bigger every year and is now 33 tracks long, I think. But anyway, I put those 2 things up, and I didn't have a bit of business in December. She's like, but the other year round, it just sits there. And I went, yeah, it kind of does. And then she said, right, how many songs have you actually written? And I said, I have no fucking idea. If it's not into the thousands, it's in the very high hundreds, because there's a time in the noughties there when I was on like 4 or 5 different radio shows and writing 2 songs a week for each of them, So, I mean, there's times there when I was writing probably well over 100 songs a year, And she said, right, well, what have you actually done with any of them, apart from the 60 or 70 that were on your actual albums? And I said, well, they're just kind of sitting around on hard drives. She's like, right, screw that. We're putting them all up. I went, yeah, all of them. Said, yeah, all of them. We are digging them all out. We're putting them all up. We're going to arrange them into Bandcamp, into like themed EPs and albums, collected according to subject matter and everything. And yesterday we put up the 80th. That's album.
Wow.
Not
track. 80 albums.
80 albums. Now, there's a bit of overlap. A couple of tracks turn up on more than one, but yeah, and the ironic thing is I've now long since exhausted all the stuff that I have a decent quality recording of. I'm going back to the stuff that I wrote back in the days when I didn't have any decent home recording equipment. So I'm having to re-record all my early shit, which is the only time my career will ever overlap with that of Taylor Swift. But yes, just me and Taylor re-recording all the oldies. But what was I going to say? Yeah, for example, these things all want some kind of cover art, because even though they're just downloads, they are arranged like a sort of a virtual record shelf in the shop, So these all require cover art. Now, some of them I'm just sort of using photos of myself. Some of them are photos taken. I mean, using a guy called Happy Toast a lot, who's this brilliant caricaturist. Very, very distinctive. And he's done my show poster for this year's Edinburgh, and we use him a lot. Now, it would be, with this way that AI imaging's got now, since GPT's doing images as well, because there used to be one called AI Generate. It was terrible, right? But whereas GPT, I think, has got access to everything, and as such, its database is that much broader that can actually come up with really authentic-looking stuff. It would be dead easy for me to run it off on that, but I kind of don't want to, because there is there's a bit of a backlash against that, so you could bring in trouble for yourself. But B, I kind of think that that's the stuff that I should be getting people to do. But on the other hand, all of this shit's only possible because I've got GarageBand on my computer. Now, with GarageBand and a couple of guitars, I can sound like pretty much any rock band I've ever wanted to. You know what I mean? Now, even as recently as the millennium, for me to do that, I would have been hiring musicians. I would have been booking studio time.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not doing any of that now. So one might argue, on what basis is using GarageBand to recreate the sound of classic rock acts on my own? I mean, it helps that I like to play guitar. You know what I mean? I can't, it isn't, It helps that I am actually a musician and I can play, and I can sing. And I can sing like lots of different people, and I can play like lots of different people. Part of the fun, I'm quite a good guitar impressionist, But so it helps that I'm bringing those skills to it. But the fact remains that in order to do the stuff I'm doing, as recently as 25 years ago, I would have had to been booking studio time, hiring musicians, blah, blah, blah. Now, how is that any more or less ethical than getting ChatGPT to do me album covers? Do you see what I'm saying? Is it just that we've got used to one and we haven't got used to the other? Because I'm sure there was, I know there was resistance probably from, the musicians' unions of the world when all this stuff started to become available. The musicians' unions were outraged at the rise of synthesizers at the end of the 70s, because synthesizers and sequencers, you can just load all that shit up, press a button, and it plays along with you. And that used to be a human being's job. You're putting human beings out of work. So one could argue, but then again, by the same token, GarageBand only produces good results for me because I'm still a good musician. Now, in order to create a good cover image from an album, even if you got an AI generator to actually produce the picture, wouldn't you have to have at least a bit of an artist's eye to know what you wanted it to make? I don't know.
Yeah,
but
yeah, but no, you'd have to still have that creativity to instruct it, I suppose, so that it will create something that was artistic, I suppose. Yeah.
I don't know. It's because on the one hand, you just think, this is horrendous. I think at the moment, part of the trouble is it's still not very good at it. You can tell. You can spot AI art a mile off, and you still can. The way it gets things slightly wrong. It's still getting things slightly wrong in that very telling sort of way. But 5 or 6 years, that might no longer be the case. 5 or 6 years, it could well be that, for example, and this is when we're really in trouble, AI-generated video is completely distinguishable from the real thing. And that's when, the disinformation lobby are really going to go to town, because suddenly you can have full-screen video of anybody doing anything you want them to do.
Yeah, anything is real and therefore nothing.
Yeah, it can say, to get your opponents to say and do the most atrocious things on video, and then circulate that amongst all your supporters. They all go off the deep end because, of course, they don't watch any video from anybody other than you. That's such as the polarization of things right now. That's the trouble. We're all just basically kind of howling into the void, because you can come up with all these damning facts and these, hideous exposés, but the people who need to see it are never going to see it because they don't believe anything you say because it's you.
Yeah.
And so that's the new kind of political environment they operate in. But so that's when that's not even necessarily on an unintended consequence. I think some people are actually very much looking forward to that bit.
Okay,
when AI generated video becomes completely indistinguishable from the real thing. To the naked eye anyway, funnily enough, actually, one of the good things about it, people were up in arms when they did that CG Luke Skywalker for The Mandalorian. Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Luke Skywalker turns up in The Mandalorian, but because Mandalorian is set just after Return of the Jedi, it's Return of the Jedi era Luke, and not 70-year-old Mark Hamill. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, that's a bit bloody cheap. Why didn't you just get Sebastian Stan? He looks a bit like him. Yeah, he does. But, the point is, I actually find myself thinking, I'm actually glad they're doing that, because they're showing the public how easy it is to do.
Yeah.
Because I think, the public know that Mark Hamill is in his 70s and that the Luke Skywalker you're seeing on screen in The Mandalorian is not real. That was the most ironic thing. There was a bit when he was training Baby Yoda. And, of course, Baby Yoda's an animatronic. He exists. Because, Jean Favreau was very determined that Baby Yoda was going to be an animatronic so that the rest of the cast could interact with him properly. And so it wasn't just going to be like a tennis ball in a basket, So you got this thing where you've got Luke instructing Baby Yoda, and Baby Yoda's real. The little green alien's real, and the human being isn't.
Strangely, I don't remember anyone getting upset about them doing the same thing with Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Terminator sequels.
The only time, exactly. Maybe I think it's because Arnold is there, so he's obviously. I think there's always a suspicion when they bring when they brought Cushing and Carrie back Although of course Carrie wasn't actually dead yet when they made Rogue One. She died I think literally the day it came out. I think, but they brought Cushing back from the dead for Rogue One, and they rejuvenated Carrie, and I think a lot of that is the suspicion that this is going on behind somebody's back, who has or hasn't signed off on this. And I think the thing about the Terminator, apart from Salvation, the Christian Bale one, where they had a CG Arnie, and that was the only Arnie that was in it, briefly turns up at the end, you have a CG Arnold. But in all the subsequent ones, you've had old Arnold and CG rejuvenated Arnold, and then you wonder, is he a complete CG recreation or of the de-aged Arnold? I still haven't seen the last Indiana Jones, but I know there's a prologue set during the war, and it's 40 years de-aged Harrison Ford playing himself.
Although, as we found with The Irishman, not moving like a 40-year younger man, just kind of looking.
I was talking about that with Kathy yesterday. The trouble with The Irishman was, A, the facial de-aging wasn't that great, but B, they're all moving like 80-year-old guys.
Yeah.
And there's something about body language. It's just you can't really change it. You can't really change it. You can't change a 70-year-old guy's body language to make him move like a 30-year-old. And I don't know what that is. How you would do that? You'd have to sort of. So now I guess you're having 30-year-old body doubles with Bobby De Niro's face stuck over it. Face on. Well, they're doing a lot of that. Doing a lot of facial replacement for. Apparently, the car chase in Logan, they did that. Because it's James Mangold again, isn't it? He wanted to show the car chase from inside the car with Logan driving, but they couldn't risk having Hugh Jackman driving through the desert at 90 miles an hour. So it's just Hugh Jackman's face. It's just a face replace over the stunt driver. Every time it pans around to show Wolverine driving, it's the stunt driver with Hugh Jackman's face matted over it. This is it. So one of the reasons I actually think it's a good thing to be using that technology for special effects is because the public know that that's a special effect, and that, I hope, is planting in the minds of the public the extent to which this shit can be seamlessly faked now. Yeah. Like those. Do you remember those Tom Cruise deepfakes that came out about 3 or 4 years ago? It's a guy who does a really good Cruise impression. So he's got all the mannerisms and he's got the voice right. So, and he looks a bit like him anyway. He's a guy who does, he's this sort of professional Tom Cruise lookalike. And he was just doing these little pieces to cameras, like he's doing magic tricks and playing golf and everything. And they just replaced his face with the actual Cruise face.
Okay.
And and if you didn't know, you probably wouldn't notice. It's not him. And that's, I guess, there's, well, I guess, we had it with Cushing. They literally brought him back. Although, interestingly, he was credited as Guy Henry, who was the guy who was actually playing him on set with his face covered in mocap dots. And then they replaced his face with Peter Cushing. Interesting fact, and vaguely topical, the reason that they had a cast of Peter Cushing's face to years is because Peter Cushing's family kept the one that they made for Top Secret for that big fake eye.
Really?
Do you remember Top Secret? Yeah. They had to take a cast of Cushing's face to make that prosthetic for the big fake eye. And of course, we just lost Val Kilmer, which is a terrible shame. Because Top Secret's one of the most underrated movies of all time. I love that movie. It's funny, even people are like mad keen on the airplane movies and the Naked Gun movies who've never heard of Top Secret, which is like the other one. Their composite war movie and Elvis movie, which is brilliant. And but yeah, so that was that's why they had a cast of Peter Cushing's face to scan in for Rogue One. Yeah.
Well, here we are, back in the shed. Our rambles, for now, are at an end. And Mitch Benn, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure rambling with you this week. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone at home as well, of course. And we really hope that you enjoyed this week's meeting of the Rambling Club.
We certainly do. Now, the club meets every Friday, but if you'd like to get in touch in the meantime, here's how you can find your fellow members.
Tony's official website is at www.tonyslattery.com, and you can get in touch on the contact form on the website.
We're at Twitter at Slattery Live. Please feel free to use the hashtag TSLC, to discuss any of this week's topics.
And I'm on Twitter too, at Paul Carmichael V, but I'm also on Blue Sky at Paul Carmichael V, as is Slattery Live as well.
That's right, and Tony also has one of those good old-fashioned Victorian Facebook groups at www.facebook.com/groups/the-Tony-Slattery.
And he's on Instagram too, at Tony_Slattery_official.
We did a really bad job of making sure those were all the same and easy to remember. But if people want to join the Rambling Club for themselves, how do they do that, Paul?
Well, what you can do is you can head to www.patreon.com/Slattery Live, and we'd be delighted to welcome you there. As a member, you get your club badges, you get a couple of photographs, and you get all sorts of other perks as well. You can hear the episodes about a month in advance, and without adverts as well. So head over to www.patreon.com/Slattery Live, and we'll see you over there.
Yeah, and I think Mitch is on Patreon as well, so
The
plenty to
CGRD,
check out
and that
on
was
his
the
Patreon as well.
I'm the easiest guy in the world to find online. My name is Mitch Benn, MITCHBENN. Put that into any search engine, they'll all pop up. I don't really do Twitter anymore because it's full of twats. I turn up on there to plug stuff, that's all. If you actually want to hang out, I'm at Blue Sky now, which used to be invitation only but isn't anymore. So if you actually want to talk to me, I'm far more approachable on Blue Sky. My Facebook is Mitch Benn. My Instagram is Mitch Benn. I've got a slew of stuff coming up. In particular, I appear to have rather got a bit nuts for the Rick Mail Festival.
Yes.
Which is happening in Droitwich at the end of the month. Because I heard about this, and Rick and Ade were my rock stars when I was a teenager. I only really realized this when Rick died, that at that time of life in your mid-teens when you're meant to be obsessing about bands and like feverishly anticipating their next tour and album, I was obsessed with Rick and Ade and the gang and feverishly anticipating their new TV show. They were just my rock stars when I was a teenager. I only really realized that when Rick died. Never got to meet Rick, met Ade a few times. Ade's lovely. But when I discovered there's going to be this Rick Memorial Festival, I thought there's no bloody way that's happening and I'm not involved. So I immediately got the organizer and pitched them a bunch of ideas. I'm doing a solo show. I'm there for the first, I think it's the first weekend, which is Saturday, May 31st and Sunday, June 1st. Saturday, May 31st. Yeah, Saturday, May. Well, I know because at least one of the things I'm doing, I think, is for you guys.
It is, yes.
Saturday, May 31st, I'm overcommitted like crazy. I'm doing the launch thing in the morning. I think I'm doing a podcast with you guys. Am I not? Is that what I'm doing?
You are, yes.
Also, Comedy Club for Kids are there, and they're doing two shows. They're doing their usual show at about 2 in the afternoon, and then a grown-up show at about 5. I'm doing both of those. And I've got my solo show, which I'm constructing entirely from scratch because I want it to be a sort of, Rick and Ade themed show, which is called Mitch Benn is a Wide-Eyed Loner at the Gates of Oblivion. I'm doing that, I think, on the Saturday night. And then I pitched them the idea. We went to, how about I put a band together? On one of the nights we do just, a rock concert of all the sort of Rick-adjacent songs. So, obviously, a bunch of Bad News. I know that was Ade's band, but Rick was on bass. Some of the songs that say the band's guesting on the Young Ones did. Some of the songs that Rick himself actually performed as parts of Bizarre Cabaret from time to time. And I pitched this to the organizer student. He's like, yes, brilliant. And he immediately booked it in and thought, and I don't have a band. So I thought, right, I'm going to... So I asked the two guys from my previous band, Matt and Ivan, because I thought, I need to at least ask them. You know what I mean? And they went, yeah, we're doing it. And I thought, yeah. And then I thought, okay, now I really need somebody to make up the numbers. And then suddenly I thought, well, hang on, because one thing I still might do this, see who's up there and see if people want to get up and do guest slots on that one. But somebody I definitely was thinking of trying to get to do guest slot was Ronnie Golden. And suddenly I thought, what asked Ronnie to be in the band? And he's agreed. So Ronnie is in the band, which is brilliant because A, he's a wonderful bloke. B, he's just a bit of a comedy rock legend. And C, that's him being Buddy Holly in The Young Ones.
Oh, is it? When he's stuck to the ceiling.
When Mike finds Buddy Holly hanging upside down in his bedroom, that's Ronnie. So what we may actually do what we may actually do between now and this show on June 1st is finish off Cuckoo Daddy Longlegs, which is the song that Buddy sings to Mike while hanging upside down and then is cut short when he falls and smashes his head through the floorboards. So, yeah, that song has remained unfinished since 1982. So we may just finally finish and perform in full Cuckoo Daddy Longlegs. So I'm absolutely made up that Ronnie's agreed to be part of that. So the band is, it was going to be Mitch Benn and the Alpha Males, but I think that's just called The Alpha Males featuring Mitch Benn and Ronnie Golden. So that's on Sunday, June the 1st. Almost certainly the only time that's ever going to happen, folks. So if you can make it to Droitwich on Sunday, June the 1st, get to Droitwich on Sunday, June the 1st, because and then after that, I guess it's all full steam ahead to Edinburgh. And this year, I'm doing a slightly different spin. I'm doing a show called The Lehrer Effect about Tom Lehrer, about how he was my comedy songwriting idol and kind of the not so much, as necessarily always a direct inspiration, but he's kind of the standard that I aspire to, And it's about
97, hasn't he?
He did a couple of days ago, yes, and legendarily sort of grumpy old curmudgeon, but one thing he did do about 2 years ago was rescind all his copyrights. All his stuff is now public domain. So anybody can do anything.
Seen a stage took advantage of this.
Yes, there's been a couple. I saw one called Tom Lehrer is busy teaching math and doesn't want to talk to you, which is quite funny. A sort of crypto-biographical thing was on down here in London. But yeah, my show's just called The Lehrer Effect. So it's going to be the effect to which he ended up kind of accidentally steering my career. I'm going to sing some of his songs, but I'm going to sing some of his songs in ways that they've never been heard before. Because I wonder if part of the reason that he's done this is normally this is the shit that only happens after you die, and I think he wants to know what people are going to do with it while he's still here.
It's a little like being alive to attend your funeral, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a bit like getting to read your own obituary. Yeah. I'm putting that show together even as we speak, and there's going to be a whole bunch of previews for that throughout like June and July, which are up at mitchbenn.com if people want to go and have a look at them. And just generally, I've got a new podcast up and running as well because it's, let's face it, it's the Ugly White Guys Only fans. I didn't originate that. I read it somewhere, but anyway. But my podcast is called "We Know a Song About That, Don't We?" Because having established that I've been writing satirical songs for basically 30 years now, I have written satirical topical comedy songs on literally every topic imaginable. So every time something comes up in the news, Kathy and I end up looking at each other and saying, "We know a song about that, don't we?" And so I thought, so how about we do this? Rather than write new songs for it, talk about things that go in the news and then play the song I wrote the last time this shit happened. So that's the format. So that's been going quite well. So that's up on all your normal podcast providers. We know a song about that, don't we? So yes, that's been quite fun.
Absolutely. Get in touch by any of those methods. We'd be delighted to hear from you, and we will be back for another ramble next Friday at 5 to 5, and we hope that you'll join us again. But in the meantime, it's a goodbye from myself, Paul Carmichael. It's a goodbye from a colleague, Mr. Alan Lear.
Goodbye.
And it is a goodbye from our very special guest president, Mr. Mitch Benn.
Hail and farewell.
You have been listening to Tony Slattery's Rambling Club with our special guest president, Mitch Benn. He was accompanied by Stephen Fry as the voice of the bingo machine. Acting President Ben was assisted by Paul Carmichael and Alan Lear. The music was composed and performed by Michael Livesley and Andy Frizzle. Silly Voices are by Michael Livesley and the show's concept is by Paul Carmichael. Our producers are Stuart Morris and Alan Dybing, and the show's researchers is Sola Carmichael. The show's producers are Erica Lear and Mark Hutchinson, and the program was edited by Harry Carmichael. Our executive producer is Chris Castle, and the series executive producer is Mark Strickson. Tony Slattery's Rambling Club is a Fanfredo production.
Goodbye, and thank you for listening.